You are watching IGN Live. Marvel's fan favorite Merc with a Mouth is getting a brand new game. Here to tell us about Deadpool VR, Phil Therien, lead design manager at Twisted Pixel. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for making a Deadpool game. I'm always happy when one of those comes along, which doesn't happen all too often. Deadpool's whole thing is breaking the fourth wall, but VR is sort of breaking the fourth wall in the other direction. Can you tell a little bit about how you're immersing the player in the Deadpool's world and still having Deadpool be his sort of trademark?
Right. So Deadpool is very obviously aware that he's in a video game, right? So he's going to be talking about pop culture references when he's defeating enemies, for example. So if people have seen our demo, you throw a grenade at some bad guys, they'll say, Michael bait him. That's just the kind of stuff that Deadpool is really into. So we're making sure that the player feels like he can be Deadpool, but Deadpool's always being himself. So it's kind of a nice mix of how you play and how he responds to what you're doing.
Nice. Now, let's talk about gameplay. What is going on mechanically to make this feel like a proper Deadpool game and not just like a, VR shooter that has a guy with red gloves as the protagonist?
Right. So this is something that we're super proud of. Our game is a game that says yes to the player. So when you're being Deadpool, you can do all sorts of crazy things that you'd expect Deadpool to be doing. In a shooter, do you throw your guns away? No. In Deadpool? Sure, why not? Deadpool throws guns. You can reload your weapons by doing that. You should throw your swords. That does some fun stuff as well. Should you punch people with grenades? Absolutely. Some guy comes at you, cuts off your arm. What do? You take your arm and you smack him with it. So Deadpool is all about letting you experience what it's like to be Deadpool and rewarding you for experimenting. So we have a ton of custom animations in the game that support the players doing super cool stuff. Jump off the walls, dive down with your sword, cool stuff happens.
Let's talk dismemberment, because that's obviously a big part or parts of Deadpool. How does that roll into the gameplay? And also, how do you have a fail state as a guy who can't really be killed?
So Deadpool's a super interesting character because obviously he has regeneration. So that translates into a couple of things. One is in gameplay. So obviously you lose an arm, like I was mentioning, you're not out of the fight. You can keep going. You can even use your limbs as a weapon, and your limbs will grow back. You'll see that happening in real time. The other thing is, it kind of ties into how Deadpool solves problems, right? Deadpool's kind of an interesting guy. So when the story starts in a game, Deadpool's hired to take over a helicarrier that's been basically hijacked by Flag Smasher. So how does Deadpool decide to stop the helicarrier? He crashes a Jeep into it. What happens to Deadpool? Why, he loses his head. But Deadpool's not out, right? That's just something that can happen to Deadpool, and then you have to play along. So Deadpool gets his body back and gets back in the fight. So it lets us do some really interesting puzzle solving, and the story is just really fun. If you put your mind into being Deadpool and you solve problems like Deadpool does, you're gonna have a blast.
Nice. Let's talk about traversal. Aside from crashing Jeeps into stuff, we also have got this sort of like kind of a grappling beam. Tell us about just kind of moving around the game.
Right, so the game is a good mix of parkour and combat, and those moves are meant to tie into each other. So you can slide, you can run, you can wall run, and if you use your weapons while you're using those moves, you can do some cool stuff as well. So if you slide and use your swords, for example, in some instances, you can cut the legs off of enemies by sliding underneath them. So really, there's a lot of depth to it. And I do want to say, though, it might sound like it's really elaborate and it's really deep, and it is, but it's not a barrier for people. If you just want to go around and be Deadpool and shooting people, you can do that. That works fine. But if you really want to experiment and be the best ninja Deadpool that you can be, the game absolutely supports it.
So that's always a big thing with VR, is some people handle it better than others. What kind of, I guess, accommodations are you making for people who maybe get a little queasy doing parkour as Deadpool?
So this is the 5th game that Twisted Pixel's been working on, and really we've learned a lot about what makes people comfortable in VR. So we have a lot of comfort options in the game, and I'll say that I think they're probably some of the best that we've put together so far. We've had a lot of people come playing saying, hey, I'm a little worried VR might make me queasy. They've tried our options and they had a really good time playing, so I think we're doing a really good job. We have presets for comfort options, but they're also fully customizable. So if somebody wants something very specific, they can do that as well.
Right on. Yeah, this is Twisted Pixel's 5th VR game. Before that, Twisted Pixel was making, weirdly enough, good Kinect games. That's kind of a freakish concept. Can you tell us a little bit about how this game is building on previous experience and really taking advantage of the hardware?
Right. So I think if you look at the DNA of Twisted Pixel and kind of what the studio is like, we've always wanted to do some fun, edgy, cool, interesting gameplay. And when we had the opportunity to pick up an IP, like Deadpool was kind of an obvious fit for us. So we're putting a lot of our personality into what that gameplay is like. It translates into the humor of how you fight the enemies, the writing, which is read by Neil Patrick Harris, which is doing an absolutely amazing job, by the way. We really wanted to have our own unique spin on Deadpool. So really having Neil Patrick Harris, our own story, our own visual art style, it's really all tying into making a really unique Deadpool experience that really fits the DNA of Twisted Pixel.
Nice. I want to talk about Neil Patrick Harris. What was it like working with him? And you also amazingly got a video where Ryan Reynolds is doing Doogie Howser cosplay and just talking trash about him. And it all comes together very well. How does Neil's sort of portrayal of Deadpool differ from the one people might know from the movies?
So I think the thing that Neil is doing really well is he wants Deadpool to sound familiar to people, but have his own unique take on things. And that was really important for us. As I mentioned, we wanted to have our own unique spin on Deadpool. So Neil will read the lines, but many times he'll have his own joke. He'll put his own spin on things, and it oftentimes ends up better. He's really been having a blast being the character. And as you've seen, we've had a really good reaction from Ryan Reynolds. He's been, taking this with a lot of grace. It's actually been a lot of fun. The amount of interest that people have had in Deadpool and sort of the buzz around it is really electrifying the team. Everybody's super excited about it.
He's a very malleable character. Like, you can really do a lot of fun stuff with him. It seems like a pretty natural fit. Can you talk a little bit about the larger lore and like where this exists in the immensely complex Marvel multiverse?
Yeah, so being inspired from the comics, it gives us the opportunity to do all sorts of stuff that we haven't been able to do before. So we're going to go to interesting places like Sincaria. We've got Ashida, the Spirit of Xandar. We're going to be going to Mojo World, which hasn't been explored a whole lot, which means, are we going to run into Mojo? Absolutely. You're going to duke it out with Flag Smasher. You're going to go into fights with Lady Deathstrike. We have Omega Red and some other characters that we haven't even talked about just yet. So really exotic places, cool villains, and all that kind of ties together. I talked a little bit about, Deadpool trying to take over a helicarrier. I won't say exactly what happens in between Mojo coming in, but Deadpool ends up signing a contract he didn't read the fine line all that well on, and then he goes after villains for Mojo, and all that's going to culminate into something that happens in Mojo World. So pretty interesting, cool story, and lots of cool bad guys.
Nice. Can you talk a little bit about sort of how you move through this world? Because we saw some sequences that kind of look like they're sort of scripted on rails. There's obviously sort of bigger arena type areas, and then something in between. How does the sort of story progress through the universe?
Sure. So it's a narratively driven single-player campaign game. We do have one rail sequence at the beginning. It's a Jeep sequence that you've seen in footage, but the rest of the game plays as Deadpool, first-person action game, traversal, combat, range, melee, and basically you do have a sequential story. We have some spots in the game where you get to take a break, upgrade your weapons, which, by the way, we have amazing upgrades in the game. We don't just have like stat upgrades on our weapons. Like if Deadpool upgrades a sword, it could turn into a boomerang. If he upgrades his pistols, all of a sudden they shoot exploding bullets. So you get a little bit of time in between some levels to kind of do those upgrades, kind of figure out what you want to do next. And then we also have replayability features. Some people have seen maybe some doors in our demos. We're not talking about what those are just yet, but we do have some really cool replayability features.
Cool. I guess I was going to say, VR games are often kind of on the shorter side, and it's, that's fine because it can be a lot. It can be a lot to take in. But again, what sort of stuff are you adding for replayability in terms of, I guess, bonus missions, challenge modes, stuff like that?
Right. So we do have some secrets that you can find that lead to secret levels. We have all the upgrades. We're going to have some special things that you can do that will unlock stuff. And I'm being super, mysterious. We'll talk about those pretty soon. And then we have those doors that lead to some content that players haven't quite, been introduced to yet. But we will soon. We're keeping some things to reveal a little bit later. But we really want players to feel like they can play through the game, but then go backwards and play levels that they like as much as they want. So the game has a lot of freedom in how you choose to play it. But I will say that it's a full-length campaign, so it's not just a little gimmicky experience. Like, it's a full, strong narrative. It's a great experience.
Right on. One thing I love in VR is doing incredibly mundane, little things. Again, you always say yes to the player. Just kind of little, almost like little gadgets you would encounter in the world. Can you tease any of the stuff that maybe it doesn't really sound exciting on paper, but that people are responding well to in the game?
Yeah, so one of the features that we have in the game is you can defeat enemies in special ways. Now, we don't tell you exactly how that works, but if you figure it out, sometimes you can get something out of defeating those enemies. So for example, we have one type of enemy in the game. You defeat them. If you defeat them a certain way, one of their body parts becomes a grenade, then you could use that as a weapon. So if you piece that together, it's actually super fun. You can take enemies' limbs, you can take their weapons, so we're trying to make it as interactive as possible. Same thing with your grapple gun. Your grapple gun isn't just for going from point to point at levels. You can grapple enemies, you can grapple weapons. It's trying to be as flexible as possible.
Right on. The movies have made some very good use of licensed music. Can we expect more bangers on the soundtrack? Can you talk about that at all?
So I'll say that our trailer is basically just the first little hint about how cool our soundtrack is. We're gonna have some amazing music in the game. We have great voice actors, great music. It's an awesome experience. It's what you'd expect out of a Deadpool game. So it's gonna be bombastic. It's gonna have the gore. We're definitely gonna be an M-rated game, we think. It's more than likely. We've got the jokes, we've got the fourth wall breaking. So put all that together with the badass music, kick-ass soundtrack, it'll be amazing.
Right on. You mentioned voice actors. Can we expect any other big names besides NPH?
So yes, but we're not talking about them just now. I will say though, when people hear the voice actors that we've lined up, they're gonna be surprised.
Awesome. Well, I am dying to find out more. Thank you so much. Deadpool VR hits MetaQuest 3 and 3S later this year, and we've got tons more IGN Live ahead, so don't go anywhere.